Yeah, boy.
You've probably heard the term democracy being thrown a lot, but what does it actually mean? And how does it apply to us here in Indonesia? Today we're going to break it down what democracy is, its core principles, and how Indonesia's democratic journey has shaped the nation we live in today. Democracy comes from the Greek words demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning power. So democracy literally means power to the people. It's a system where the people have the authority to choose their leaders and influence government decisions. You've probably heard of the famous phrase, of the people, by the people, and for the people. This means that the government is literally created by the people itself and run by the people itself and works for the people's benefit. And it all sounds good, right? But how does it actually work in practice? Democracy isn't just about voting, it's built on several core principles. And here are a few that I can think of. Firstly, free and fair elections. The people have the right to choose their leaders through regular, transparent elections. The leader is selected based on the majority of the population, meaning that the majority of the population have agreed that this person is the leader. Second is freedom of speech. Everyone has the right to express their opinions, whether it be positive or negative, without fear of censorship or punishment. Third is rule of law. No one is above the law. Whether you are a laborer or a billionaire, the law applies equally to all. Fourth is check and balance. Power is distributed among different branches of the government to prevent abuse. In Indonesia, this is embodied in the trias politica system, the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches. Fifth is equality. All citizens have equal rights and opportunities regardless of their background. So it doesn't matter where you're from, what your race is, or what background you have from whichever corner you are in your country, you should have the right to have equal opportunity in the nation. So, yeah, these principles are what makes democracy function and why it's so widespread and popular. In fact, most countries in the world today are democratic, including our own, the Republic of Indonesia. Indonesia's road to democracy, though, has been far from smooth. Since its independence in 1945, Indonesia has gone through several phases of governance, each shaping the democracy we have today. So, after independence, Indonesia adopted a parliamentary system with multiple parties. Despite holding its first democratic elections in 1955, political infighting and regional rebellions caused instability and thus weakening the government, which ultimately undid this parliamentary system. And next we go on to the next era. So President Sukarno replaced the parliamentary system with guided democracy atau demokrasi terpimpin, which centralizes power under his leadership, thus minimizing the democracy and giving him more power to control the nation. This era ended in chaos following the 1965 coup attempt, which led to Sukarno's decline. And after Sukarno's decline, Suharto took power after the 1965 coup, establishing the authoritarian New Order or Orde Baru. And while the economy grew during that time, political freedoms were suppressed. The regime censored media, controlled opposition, and committed widespread human rights abuses until its collapse in 1998. And Suharto's fall ushered in the Reformasi era. Marked by democratic reforms, Indonesia introduced direct presidential elections, a decentralized government, and greater political freedom. So after the fall of Suharto came in the Reformasi, and that is the democracy that we know now. And that's all great, right? That's all good. Suharto has fallen, no more demokrasi terpimpin, right? It should be all good. Now let's take a closer look at Indonesia's democracy today. One of the pillars of democracy is the right to speak freely, right? The freedom of speech. But in Indonesia, this right is increasingly under threat. Laws like Electronic Information and Transaction Law, the ITE law, are often used to silence critics. Under this law, journalists, activists, and even ordinary citizens like you and me can be arrested for defamation simply for criticizing government policies or criticizing the government overall. A clear example of this is the case regarding Haris Azhar and Fatia Maulidiyanti, which is a clear example of the government not wanting to hear criticism from their people itself. So that's strike one to Indonesia. How can you run a democratic country when you yourself are limiting the freedom of speech of your own people? This just proves that you yourself, as a country, do not want to listen to whatever their people has to say. Second point, a strong democracy requires check and balance. These check and balance help so that the country can do their job properly. But recent reforms have weakened Indonesia's anti-corruption watchdog, the KPK. Because in 2019, under President Joko Widodo, a controversial law was passed that significantly reduced the KPK's independence. The new law, one, stripped the KPK of its independent status by placing it under the executive branch. Second, required KPK investigators to be government employees, limiting their autonomy. And thirdly, weakened wiretapping and investigative powers, making corruption investigations more difficult to do. So how funny is that? The check and balance, the core principle that keeps everything in democracy running, is being limited. That is also, unfortunately, strike two for Indonesia. Third point, oligarchy and political dynasty are a big no for democracy because they threaten the equality that democracy offers. I won't jump into much detail, but I'm sure you all know about case 1 and of course case 2. So sadly, yet again, that is strike 3 for Indonesia's democracy. But is Indonesia still a democracy because of this? Because we still do elections, right? But issues like check and balance and freedom of speech, oligarchic influence suggest that Indonesia is shifting more towards an illiberal democracy where elections exist but democratic principles are unfortunately weakened, and that is why I think Indonesia's democracy is unfortunately fading.